everyone, and welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. This week I'll be reviewing Kong Skull Island. This is a terrific movie. It's based on the King Kong character. It's a loose interpretation of the Kong story. It varies greatly from the original story, which was told in the original film and then in the 1976 remake, which I've already done a review on. It stars John Goodman, John C. Reilly, Samuel L. Jackson, and Brie Larson. So we've got a solid cast there. It starts out, you've got two gentlemen from a scientific organization known as Monarch, which studies into the bizarre, to say the least, bizarre occurrences, the possibility of the existence of monsters. They dabble in the sciences that is considered on the fringe of reality. They have discovered the location of the mythical Skull Island. So they approach a U.S. senator who owes them a favor. They end up convincing him to give them the funding for an expedition, and they are also given a military escort while they're on the island. It's a group of troops on their way home from the Vietnam War, commanded by Samuel L. Jackson. As soon as they arrive on the island, the scientists begin setting off explosives under the pretense to map the geographical layout of the island. But what they're actually trying to do is awaken any monsters. They have a strong belief that there's monsters on this island, and boy, did they find out real quick, because it doesn't take long at all for them to have their first encounter with Kong, who is extremely angry that they've come to his island, and now they're stirring everything up by setting off these explosives. He attacks the helicopters that they're in. About 2/3 of the group is in a group of about 15 helicopters flying around, dropping the explosives. Kong attacks them. He destroys every one of the helicopters. You have a handful of survivors who are scattered all over the south end of the island, and they begin trying to hook back up with each other because they've only got a couple days to get back to the north end of the island, where they're due to be picked up. And because of the perpetual storm system that exists around Skull Island, if they're not there in 2 days, that window closes, and there's no telling, they could be there for years before another opportunity arises for them to be rescued. So it's kind of a race against the clock at this point to get to the north end of the island to be rescued. The scientific team is scattered amongst different military groups of military men, and as they begin to come back together, you have two main groups, one led by Samuel L. Jackson, who is now determined that he is going to rescue one of his men that is trapped in the mountainous region of the island, and he absolutely will not take no for an answer. No matter how dangerous it might be to get up there and try to rescue this guy, he's going to do it at all costs. Even though the rest, even some of the other men in the unit are trying to talk him out of it, he's not hearing it. The other group, they end up coming up on a village of natives that live on the island, and that's when they encounter John C. Reilly's character. And he was a pilot during the Second World War, and he had got shot down over the island. And as he crash landed, so did a Japanese fighter pilot. And upon crashing on the island, both of them lock up in a battle to the death. And that's when they encounter Kong. Of course, this is, around 30 years prior to the story of the movie. It's just a little backstory they give us there. And because of the encounter with Kong and then the constant struggle for survival, they end up becoming friends. And unfortunately, John C. Reilly's Japanese friend is killed by a race of monsters that live on the island that he refers to as skull diggers. Now they they end up repairing a boat that John C. Riley and the Japanese pilot had begun to build but had never finished. With all the additional help, he's able to get the boat running. They head up the river toward the north end of the island, trying to get there in time to be rescued. They end up meeting up with Samuel L. Jackson's group. He immediately takes command, forces them to go along with him on the rescue mission, even though now the vast majority is completely against it. He has, Jackson at this point has pretty much gone off his rocker. It's not so much he wants to rescue his man anymore as it is he just wants to find Kong and kill him. And he just will not listen to reason. They eventually, they wander into a graveyard, a monster graveyard. There's bones all over the place. This is where they get attacked by several of the skull crawlers. I call them skull diggers. They're actually referred to as skull crawlers. They're attacked by several of them. A large portion of the group is killed off. This is also where John Goodman's character gets killed. He was one of the scientists that started up the expedition in the first place. His character is killed in this scene. The handful that survive, they make it to the crash site and find the remains of the guy they were coming to rescue. So this has all been for nothing. But like I said, at this point, Samuel L. Jackson had not intended to find the man alive. This was more of a vengeance. He wants to hunt down Kong and kill him. And a little bit later on in the film, they get their opportunity. They lure Kong in by setting off some explosives. They pour napalm all over the lagoon, and as Kong is crossing the lagoon, they set it on fire, hoping that'll kill him. He's badly burned, but it doesn't kill him. And as he's about to crush the colonel, Samuel L. Jackson's character, one of the skull crawlers, shows up. They get into a fight. Kong gets injured, knocked down. The skull crawler goes after the rest of the group as they're fleeing the scene. Samuel Jackson's character stays because he's at this point gone completely mad. He wants to blow up Kong. As he gets ready to hit the button on the detonator to the explosives that Kong is at the time laying on top of, Kong reaches over with his fist and just crushes him. So that's the end of Samuel L. Jackson's character. Now the rest of them are trying to get back to the boat that they left at the river. But just before they get there, the skull crawler catches up to them. It looks like it's going to be curtains for them. But Kong shows up and begins fighting with the skull crawler. We find out at this point, though I haven't mentioned her character yet, Brie Larson is a photographer that came along on the expedition, and Kong has kind of taken a liking to her. You kind of see the parallel there with the Fay Wray, Jessica Lange thing. In this case, it's Brie Larson, but Kong takes a liking to her. One of the skull crawler tries to get to her. Kong is enraged. They have a terrific battle scene. It's awesome. You'll love it. Very action-packed, very well shot. The CGI is wonderful. It's a great battle. Kong eventually defeats and kills the skull crawler, and the rest of them make it to the boat and get to the rendezvous point and are rescued. And we're left with a parting shot of Kong roaring and beating his chest. And then in the scenes, if you stay long enough to watch the scene following the ending credits, we see that the team went back to the island later and discovered some cave drawings in part of the subterranean in the subterranean area of the island. And the cave drawings are of one of them looks like Mothra, one of them looks like Rodan. And then we see a cave drawing that resembles Godzilla and one that resembles Ghidra, which is basically the setup for the film that came out this past summer, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Kong Skull Island was actually the second film in Universal's new MonsterVerse. Godzilla King of the Monsters was the third, and from all indications, in 2020 they intend to release Godzilla versus King Kong, which will be the fourth, and at this time, what they're saying will be the final addition to the Universal MonsterVerse. I really hope not. I hope they carry on afterwards, because these movies have been excellent. They've been well thought out, well written, well directed. They've had wonderful casts. I'd like to see the MonsterVerse continue forward, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. But if you're a King Kong fan, even though this varies, like I said, quite a bit from the traditional Kong story, this is still a wonderful, wonderful version of King Kong. It's a great movie. You need to check it out if you haven't seen it already. That's Kong Skull Island. So if you, like I said, if you haven't seen this, put it on your to-watch list, because this is a brilliant movie. It's available on Blu-ray, DVD, as well as multiple streaming services. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this week's review. And until next time, you all take care.